I realized before I came here tonight, I'm still like hung up with a little scene we had when you were here with Knives and Skin, a question about why there was this thing with blood in your film. It stayed with me ever since because it was my yoga teacher who asked that question. So I want to pose that question to you tonight. What makes you so hung up with blood?
The funny thing is, like, you know, it wasn't until this film premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, as you know, because you were there, and it wasn't until honestly the press reviews came out, you know, then they were like, it's blood soaked, it's a bloodbath, it's blood covered. I was like, what? There's not that much blood in this film. So it was really, I guess it's quite unconscious for me or it wasn't purposeful even for this film or I didn't realize, let's say, even though at some point I walked onto set and there was like 5-gallon vats of blood, you know, of like theatrical blood, of course, on set. And I thought, like, oh, okay, it's like, that's what we're doing, you know? But even with Knives and Skin, or maybe even prior to that, but just after Knives and Skin, I was asked a lot about why I thought that there were a lot of women who were writing and directing more genre films. And one of my answers was oftentimes about our relationship, or people who have uteruses, let's say, you know, the relationship to blood from a very young age. And I'm doing a panel. It is tomorrow, called With like, the Body of Expectations, which I think is a lot about like blood and motherhood. And I have 3 children, and I think that, you know, also childbirth is sort of genre, you know? And so it's just I have a very organic and consistent relationship with blood. And so as a filmmaker, it just feels like sort of a no-brainer to put it into the films, and it sort of fits in, I don't know, in the genre world. But in Perpetrator in particular, I also wanted her blood to have a kind of agency, you know, that her blood knew what was going to happen before she did. And a part of that comes a little bit from my background as a dancer. So I was a dancer for a long time, and Martha Graham, this incredible, you know, American choreographer, would talk about dance and choreography and dancers' bodies as being related to something called blood memory. You know, that you would, I don't know, that your blood has memory, and I liked somehow weaving this into the story of Perpetrator.
Before we get too much carried away about this thing, questions from the audience, please.
If you ask a question, I have here's what I have. I have buttons, like pins, that say hatchet wound. Of course. I have a couple pairs of gold monster teeth, and I have exactly 2
I think I'd ask a question too.
bloody baby doll heads.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. Is this thing turned on? Okay, hi, Jennifer. I really loved the queer representation and the gender fluid representation to some reason for the shapeshifters. Shapeshifter creature thing, but I would say I interpreted the power that Jean and Jean had as kind of like a shapeshifter or like a vampire thing. Is that correct, would you say? And if how the powers are transmitted how does that like metaphorically represent in the grand scheme of the story? Because I kind of implied that all these like women or femme-presenting people had like this common experience that they can relate to each other. So is that what were you going for the supernatural elements?
Yeah, so I set out to make a shapeshifter story, just more or less based on the questions that I was getting around making so many films about the experiences of girls and women, where I was getting these questions like, what is it like to make all these films about girls and women? I was like, oh, it's awesome. Or maybe even girls in particular, young girls, adolescent girls. And I was like, oh, I love it, And then I like the 12th or 14th time I got asked that question, I thought, oh, I think the person asking me this question assumes that it's like their worst nightmare to walk into a room of like 40 13-year-old girls, And so I thought like, oh, wow, we're like a culture that, like loves youth and beauty among young women. And then we also kind of hate young women. And we use these terms like wild and out of control to describe young women who have agency over their sexuality or whatever. But that's not really a compliment. That's meant to diminish them. I'm getting to your answer, I promise. So I thought like, oh, well, like a wild and out of control girl who actually becomes wild and out of control. That's sort of the origins of a shapeshifter story. So I thought like, oh, I want to make a shapeshifter story. But I knew that I didn't want her to be a werewolf or a vampire, like like really look like a vampire in particular. So it's more like, so then I just started thinking like, what should she be? And it felt like it felt really productive to lean way into this idea of super empathy. Like you're so sort of empathetic that you could actually look like someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that even right now, thinking about, yeah, for sure, gender fluidity, or even the idea of just wanting to live like someone else in this world for a day where you are invisible in a really productive way felt like what I needed to lean into. And the woman, Kaya McKiernan, who plays Jonny, who is a multiracial queer woman, was like, I get it. There's something that's also that feels like it's related to code switching, where you sort of can be femme or masculine, or you can be multiracial, or you can be black, or you can be white. Like there's just these ways that you can kind of flip your identity that felt like not just productive for a shapeshifter genre story, but actually felt like it was related to how people really authentically navigate their day to day.
Do I have time for a follow-up question?
Well, what do you want? Do you want to?
I would like.
You're the first one. Do you want a baby head? Do you want a pin, or do you want some teeth?
If I have time, all three.
Okay. Here's two pins stuck to a baby head, so you get that one no matter what.
Another follow-up question: is the shapeshifter mythology something that you made up, or something that that you were inspired by?
I don't understand the question.
Maybe. Did you totally make up this mythology by yourself, or was it something that you were inspired by? I don't know, like Native American mythology or European mythology.
No. I was thinking about, I after Knives and Skin, I had rewatched the 80s iteration of Cat People, which is like this really great nuanced, shapeshifter story. And it, that in combination with my own experience of thinking about, the wild and out of control girl who really becomes wild and out of control, like that. So it was more me as like a filmmaker, storyteller, that it came out of that.
Okay.
Or I'm going to send this baby doll that's got two pins attached. You ready?
Please, over there.
Oh, that belongs right behind you. Be a good... Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Thank you.
Please. There.
First of all, I really enjoyed the film. It was really great. And so my question was about the surgeries, that like surgeries are also kind of a topic in the movie, like not just the killer or the kidnapper does them, but also like the school, I don't know what she was, secretary
like
or
the nurse
or so what, and also the one mother where it said she wants to get this procedure done. So I wanted to know about what the surgeries, what was the meaning of that. And then also a small side question in the end, in the scene when the heart gets ripped out, there is this scream sound effect. Is this like this classic scream sound effect that is also sampled in music and stuff? And oh yeah, and why you used this scream in that scene as well?
I don't think that is it called the Wilhelm scream? Is that what it's called? It's not it, but it is. It's like a little nod to it. It's not the exact same thing, but we wanted to just, there's like this, me and the sound designer who I've worked on with now. This is my third film with him. There's a bunch of sort of nerdy other film references that happen in this film, and that was one of them. But it wasn't the exact Wilhelm scream. It's like a version of that. Again, this idea that at least American culture is obsessed with youth and beauty among young women, and youth and beauty is not an accomplishment. But I wanted to take the sense of, like, if someone says, like, oh, I love your eyes, I wish I had your eyes, and then take that to this end of, like, what if you could then have someone else's eyes because you liked them better than yours, or you said, like, oh, I love your hair, or I wish I had your hair. We say that in a just a not in a literal way, but what if that became literal? There are situations, at least in the U.S., where placentas get saved and made into pills so that some movie star can take placenta pills. I don't know what the reason is for that, or human growth hormone, synthetic or organic, can be used, whether it's to preserve youth in older people or to ensure that your child is taller than they should be. It's, and some of that stuff is legitimately distributed among medical professionals, and then some of it's like weird back channel people peddling synthetic growth hormone or something. So I just took that to its kind of extreme way, and also in an allegorical way, but also in that sense that when like just the monstrous way, that so many people who have had way too many kind of like cosmetic surgeries on their face just become monstrous. They just become, not who they were before. And when I was doing post-production for Knives and Skin, we did the color correction and the VFX in Warsaw, Poland. And there was a plastic surgeon's office between my hotel and the place where we're doing the post house. So me and my DP would be like walking, and there would always be this whole parade of women in particular, just their whole faces would be bandaged up and kind of like clutching apart, kind of like not able to sort of like see where they were going. I was like, is it worth it? Like, what are they going to look like afterwards? Like, but the bandages in particular were just really fascinating to me. And I've been a big fan of this Terry Gilliam film, Brazil, where, like at some point, like her face just keeps getting stretched and she says like, my complications have had complications. And that just always really stuck with me. So I wanted to just lean into that sense of, I don't know, just bandaged faces and sort of borrowing youth and, the monstrous ways that we try to cling to, I don't know, our youth, and which is just completely frugal. Like, just let's age.
And still have sex.
What? And still have sex. What do you need? Do you need a hatchet wound pin? Do you want a bloody baby head? I've only got one left. Gold teeth?
I take
okay.
Gold teeth. If I was you, I'd take the gold teeth.
I'm gonna come over to get it because these won't travel I can't throw these very well. But don't put them in your mouth. They're for show only.
There was another question here.
So, thanks for being here. I have a very non-artsy question, and I'm so happy I'm asking the question because I really want the baby head.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
It's yours.
It's
yours. I'm going to give it to you right now. I don't even know what your question is, so you better make it good.
It's a very non-artsy question.
Fine.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you an artsy thing, which is like a little... I hand-painted that myself, by the way.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really creepy.
It's worth zero money on
Goes
eBay.
next to my hand-painted Halloween house. It's
Perfect.
fine. So my question is, I work in tech, and it's a very male-dominated industry, and oftentimes I'm put in situations simply because I'm a woman, because stereotypically women are considered more nurturing, more caring, more empathetic, and I'm just curious if you had any type of inspiration from that, and that's why you chose maybe to just really go with the empathy and exaggerate that aspect of, women in general.
Yeah, well, I wanted. That's actually a really good question, and I would say artsy adjacent. That I wanted. I mean, even Alicia Silverstone has a line which I wrote, so it sounds so dumb to be like, it's a really good line of dialogue, where she says something like, "Emotional basket case can be a very powerful weapon," and I wanted to lean into the idea. Or the myth, of like the overly emotional woman, that women are just overly emotional, therefore we are ineffectual, and just thinking about the way, for instance, like we're dealing with ridiculous, presidential campaigns right now in the U.S. And I look back on the Hillary Clinton, campaign, and that, people were saying like, there's no way a woman can be can be president. She's just so emotional. Of course, like she was beat by someone who's like a petulant child. So I wanted to lean into the idea that like actually overly emotional or like super emotional or in touch with your emotions or wildly empathetic is actually a superpower. And that felt productive to me in all sorts of ways, not only in like writing a story where that gets passed down among the women in a family, but also just to sort of reclaim that myth of like the emotional woman as, problematic, rather than say like the overly emotional woman is, that's our superpower.
Yeah, please.
Hi. I have a question. There is a little scene which I found fantastic when the mother meets the daughter finally. And she starts telling the story, and then she says, well, when you were little, you wanted everybody to call you Jennifer. So I want to hear, like, was that kind of a little self-referential thing in that line?
Well, my name is Jennifer. No, it was. I mean, it actually, there's even that part of that monologue, she says, she talks about, like, when you were 5, you were hit by an ice cream truck and you didn't learn how to tell time until the 4th grade. That actually happened to me. And so there's a lot of this film, there's a lot of all of my films, which are deeply autobiographical. And maybe that seems egotistical, maybe not. I mean, I wrote them, when I was little, at some point, because my name was so common, I remember like asking my mom if I could be called Daisy, which now I think like, wow, can you imagine if I was like, if Katja was like Daisy Reeder, that just seems so nuts. But yeah, I like to try to inject little bits of myself into the film, but that was definitely but actually even bigger parts of that monologue were directly autobiographical. And Jennifer, the name Jennifer should be like dead. Like no one should be able to name anybody else Jennifer again, just because it's sort of like there were so many women of a certain kind of decade that were all named that, at least in the U.S. So let's just no more Jennifers. What do you want? Do you want speaking of names, do you want a pin that says hatchet wound? Nothing? You don't want anything? No, but there's some gold teeth and some pins. Okay. They're so good. Will you give these gold teeth? But again, don't put them in your mouth. Or you can put them in just for a moment, for like a picture, but then don't keep them in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
Hello, welcome to Vienna. I wanted to ask, you said there was a nod to the William scream. I heard it as well. I thought it was the William scream, but what is your relationship to like funny moments in horror films? I feel like oftentimes in horror there's this very very direct relationship to humor, and I just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Okay, that's a really good question. So I'm going to try and figure out where some other little nods are in this film. Well, certainly when, after Jonny emerges from the kind of like pool of blood and she gets rescued and she's just like drenched in blood, for me that was a direct reference to Brian De Palma's Carrie. At the end where she's drenched in blood. And the interesting coincidence is that Kaya, who plays Jonny, was in an Amazon series with Sissy Spacek, who plays Carrie in the De Palma's Carrie, and sent like a little selfie of herself drenched in blood to Sissy Spacek, who just said, "Looks sticky." And I just adore Sissy Spacek so much, and I just was like so envious that somehow like I wasn't included in that. But so that was like, and Kaya knew that, that was a reference. This goes back to Knives and Skin, which I did not screen tonight, but there's a meatloaf scene in Knives and Skin, which is a direct reference to Chantal Akerman's Jeanne Dillman, which is a very slow horror film, in my opinion, but it's in there. And I have to think of some more little, they're not quite Easter eggs, but other references to, to some horror moments. But there are plenty of them in there. And I never think of myself as like a cinephile until I start talking to someone who I think is a cinephile about films, and then I'm like, oh yeah, like I guess I do watch a lot of films, and there's a lot of references to other films in my films that are very purposeful. It's not like I don't realize that they're happening. So I need to think about that, and then I'm going to just shout it out in the middle of somebody else's question.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I really enjoyed the movie, especially the music. I really liked it. So the question is, in the movie, especially the girls are the victims. they're not stealing the eyes from guys or so. It's especially the girls. And there's also this element where the policeman ends up being one of the bad guys. So I was wondering if there's any social element playing a part there. I don't know, for example, in the US, there's been many cases of police violence, and so you're so close to Mexico, to Latin America, where this women violence is very present every day. So I don't know if that's playing any part in your inspiration or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I with so many of the films that I've even made before, Perpetrator, there's oftentimes missing girls or dead girls, and I have been, you know, accused by other, I guess, feminists of being a bad feminist, you know, because I make films where there's missing girls or violence against women, or, you know, at the very least. And for me, at least, both in real life and in cinema, the reality of missing girls, dead girls, violence for sure against women has not been, quite resolved, and certainly, you know, police violence is, enormously prevalent in the United States, and it's related even to the school shooting drill, which has so much to do with the sense that, at least in the U.S., we have basically begun to incentivize victims not to be victimized, rather than kind of like dealing with the prevalence of guns and gun violence in the U.S. And so, it's, you know, my take on it is not at all meant to seem slight. You know, it's serious, but it's also, there's some satire there. You know, that's just like, this is so awful that how else can you address it. And in Perpetrator in particular, it's also, from my perspective as the writer and the director, it's also about what women in the U.S., let's say, get to be looked for if they go missing. So, for instance, there's women of color, indigenous women, sex workers, trans women who go missing or get killed. And it's not to say that they aren't missed, like their families miss them, but it doesn't become this national story. It's still the sort of thin, young, blonde, blue-haired, blue-eyed girls, you know, who, and there's, you know, those girls are amazing also and should also be looked for, you know, but there is this like a kind of a hierarchy on some level of like, you know, if you go missing in the U.S., you know, like maybe you are worthy of being looked for, and maybe you are, you know, completely unremarkably disposable and invisible. So there's something about that in Perpetrator as well, and that's deeply serious. That's not something that's like laughable, but it's in the fabric of the kind of satire of this film, and that's why, you know, when Melanie Liburd, who plays the mom, Jean, when she comes back, we realize that she's been sort of hiding as this kind of unremarkable, you know, white guy who's completely invisible. And that can be a very nice way to live your life, you know, especially if you are another kind of a person. And the funny thing is, like, I mean, I know that this film is like, I know that's not for everybody. I know there's some like weird moves I've made in this film, which are like more risky than other films. Or other moves that I made in other films. But for me, in my brain, the wildest move that I made was like, okay, the mom is going to be hiding as the dad. Like, her shape-shifting is so intense that she can just become this other person for a long time. And when we were testing this film out to audiences, everybody was like, oh yeah, that's no problem. I got that. It was more kind of like other moments in the film where people were like, I mean, why does she wear an overcoat all the time? I don't know. There was like other questions that people had, but when I would say, well, did you buy that the, you know, black mom was hiding as the white dad, they're like, yeah, of course, no, that's not a problem. So I don't know. This was an interesting test in risks in screenwriting. Did you already get your teeth? Okay, great.
There.
Thanks for coming to Viennale. I have a general question. What sound design in feature film, which kind of role plays it for you?
Oh, what was the question again? What about sound design?
What in feature film sound design, which roles does it play for you?
Oh, I mean, I'm telling you, I love. So this is the third film that I've made with a sound designer that I've worked with for the entire time, or 3 times in a row, who is a Chicago-based sound designer. And I love having these conversations with him about obviously we do a pass where it's like, okay, what's the local authentic sound? Someone chewing, footsteps, blah, blah, blah. And then we always build another whole sound design track that's about the psychology of a character or the psychology of a space, And so, for instance, in Perpetrator, the minute that Jonny comes into Hildy's apartment, there's no outside noises. Not that you would necessarily know that, but we wanted for Hildy's apartment to feel like it was sort of isolated in space and time. So she walks in there, you hear a little bit of a clock ticking, but you don't hear birds, you don't hear traffic, you hear nothing from the outside until the mom, Jean, shows up. And after sort of Jonny's been through her whole ordeal with the perpetrator, then in the conversation that she's having on the bed, you hear a little bit of birds chirping and whatnot. So not that that's something that we wanted an audience to recognize immediately, but to sort of have, but it's in there, that psychologically, that the space, that the sound design in this film is directly related to the emotionality of the characters and to the aura of the spaces, and it's really, sound design is one of my most favorite things to deal with when I'm making a film, and I pay a lot of attention to it when I'm watching other films too.
Thanks.
What do you need? Well, we're down to one set of teeth and then a bunch of buttons.
A button.
Thank you. I'm going to try and throw it to you. Do you need a button too? Oh, you need another question? Oh, you need some teeth? Oh, sure. I thought you had teeth already. What'd you get? Oh, someone. Oh, what did that guy? I gave a guy some teeth.
Oh, he
he's
disappeared
with
with
the
the
teeth.
teeth. Where is
Who
he?
has the button? You go. Okay, I'm gonna send it back there. Oh, it's gonna land on that guy's head. He got it. I'll give you a button too. This is hatchet wound. I mean, who doesn't want a button that says hatchet wound? I think we're almost wrapping up soon. Yeah, maybe. One last. Oh, there's some back there. Yeah.
Hello. What I wanted to ask was, how did you come up with that orifice thing in the chest? Especially since the kidnapper himself had one as well. And what was the idea behind that?
Well, what do you think the idea was behind that? What does it look like to you? Who's giggling?
Yeah, I really am curious to hear what you think about it. Tell us. Come on. Don't be shy. No, I mean, it's an exchange,
Yeah.
It goes back and forth. So you have to say something too.
That's a good...
What does it look like to you?
It looked like an anus.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I feel like that little prosthetic, when the New York Times gave Perpetrator a really nice review, and it called that prosthetic the angry anus.
That's cool.
And it occurred to me that perhaps never in the history of the New York Times has the term angry anus ever been said. So there's this really great VFX house or FX house that I worked with in Chicago, and this unassuming, prosthetic maker. He's like this very shy, soft-spoken guy who can just work miracles with, molds and prosthetics. And so I was like, okay, I really want like the ports to look like buttholes. Like I really think that could be really productive to make them seem not like the kind of plastic ports, when people are getting chemotherapy or whatever, but I want it to feel really organic. Whether or not we think that like that perpetrator has taken someone else's butthole and used it. I'm sorry to use that term so many times. I've never said that butthole this many times in a row. Thank you, Vienna. But then
it's all about anal here in Vienna,
That's why I keep coming back. And then I wanted the underneath of it to feel more labial, And I know that seems very kind of like binary, but it just felt like if I'm dealing with kind of bodies and body parts and like transferring and transitioning, body parts that on the one hand we all have, and at the same time, like it's, we all sort of deny. We all do all these things to sort of deny that we smell or bleed or whatever it is, And so I wanted to just try to, lean way into that. So I remember having these conversations with Anthony, who made those prosthetics early on, and I was like, okay, I want the outer ports to look like buttholes and the inner ports to look more like labial and vaginal. And he's like, okay, yeah, no problem. Like really soft spoken. And then I would just get all these examples of what they all, looked like. And I have the one that she's holding in the van, which is like which is one that never went on somebody because she had to sort of hold it. So I have that in a Ziploc bag in a cabinet in my house. I need to turn it into like a medallion, I think, on some level. But yeah, that's exactly what it looked like, and what I meant for it to look like.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think you in particular need some hatchet wound buttons. Yeah. Speaking of labial things. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. So I wanted to ask regarding the butthole thing.
Sure. Let's stay with the buttholes.
Because I saw that more metaphorical for her father being an asshole and leaving her.
Interesting.
So yeah, I wanted to ask if that was like completely made up by me, but like her father being an asshole, leaving her, and she's having that asshole as well because maybe she thinks like she's an asshole as well, being treated like an asshole. Afterwards, a vagina, being there, and she's ripping his heart out of the vagina, like meaning treating him like she was treated by him. And giving him back, like, what she felt when she was...
My gosh.
I know.
But that was too much.
God, you're so much smarter than I am.
Also, being her mother, like becoming her dad because her dad left her, the daughter, so being metaphoric as well, but... No, that was not the idea.
That's so smart. And maybe, if I were to be put under, like Freud's last apartment was here, correct? So that's why you're so smart in that regard. I wasn't thinking about it that specifically. I mean, I did like the idea of her, like pulling his heart out in a kind of a birthing way, sort of like through another weird hole in his chest. But I wasn't thinking it so much about like asshole and then her dad's an asshole. But I appreciate that. I remember saying to somebody, speaking about, this goes back to Berenice. I was doing a visiting artist at CalArts, and I said something about, I used the term dickhead to talk about like somebody else, like a guy being kind of a jerk, and I was like, oh God, he's such a dickhead. And then this male student in the class was like, oh, I take offense to that, and I was like, really? And then I had to really think about that, like that I was kind of using this, I don't know, like a body part metaphor to sort of disparage somebody. And so I've thought about that a lot. But the best part is that, I mean, we can all be assholes, no matter what that's where the genders just collapse, because we've all got buttholes and we can all be an asshole.
Thank you, Jennifer Reeder. Thank you.